Okay, here we go. We are continuing. And I'd like to remark again that this whole idea of digging up, so to speak, well, almost digging up, old-timer like Phil Spickler and convincing him that speaking for posterity as well as present time would be a good idea, since I'm sort of a walking history book. I didn't know I'd end up that way, but that's the truth, and it must be known that Tatiana, this was her idea, to find people like me, there may be others, I'm sure there are, who have a lot of history and have had a lot of interest in the subject and possibly even knew and worked with or for L. Ron Hubbard, and getting these people to make videos, to make even movies about this period so that the public, the world, gets the idea that, like Camelot, you know, and this is where my tears start to emerge. For one brief shining moment, there was kind of a round table of Dianetics and Scientology. And some of us were privileged to be at that round table with Ron when the ideals of that round table were in effect. And no matter what has transpired since then, no matter what the Church of Scientology has evolved into, no matter what those that have followed Ron in managing it have become and made of themselves, the thing that's important is that for one brief period, perhaps 10 years, from 1950 or even a little bit of 49 to 1960, there was for Scientology and Dianetics, my view of it, a Camelot. And I was privileged to be, I don't know, I think I started out as, what did they call those people that served knights? Anyway, eventually the sword of truth was touched on my shoulder and I was knighted and became someone who could carry the banner into the battle. Okay? Anyway, but I do want to give Tatiana great credit because she has brought a lot of life back to me and intends that that should go out to the world and other people. And I see her as an operating being and someone who wishes to bring help and understanding. Okay, leaving that for a moment, I've been asked numerous times over the years and recently, why, if it was so wonderful, did you leave? Why did you depart? Why did you become an ex-member of the Church of Scientology? Why did you cease to be a loyal retainer to L. Ron Hubbard? Why did you cease to push as hard as possible for the hope that people in the world would look into Dianetics and Scientology and benefit themselves, their families, their groups, and mankind? And I'm going to tell you why I finally left. It's probably a big lie, but it's as close as I can come to the truth. Anyway, it got this simple. In the United States, I can stand on a street corner with a great big bulletin that says the President of the United States is a dirty, rotten, blank, 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 and no one should have anything to do with him. He should be in jail. And I can spend the day on the street corner with that sign. And if people want to stop and ask me about it, I'll tell them why I think the President is no good. Afterwards, I can go home and go to bed, and nobody's going to call me up from the United States government and say, you shouldn't do that, we're going to pick you up and put you in jail for saying unpleasant things about the President. No one's going to appear and knock on the door and say, take me to the gulag or put me in jail and tell me, no one's going to hear from you again, ever again, because you had the nerve to say something bad about the President of the United States. No one is going to say, you're excommunicated, you're no longer a citizen of the United States, you said some bad things about the President. Well, everybody says bad things about the President if they feel like it in this country, because we have a Constitution which contains a Bill of Rights that speaks about something called freedom of speech, freedom to communicate, freedom of expression. Okay? That's this ordinary human constructed government. In that government, I can say just about anything. I think I could say anything about anything, and I don't have to, I can't urge people to do things of harm and so forth or preach revolution, but aside from that, I can say anything I want about any public figure I wish to, especially if they're a public figure. If they're a private figure, I could get into trouble for libel. But I found out around 1979 or 1980 something that had been growing on me, which was, if I wanted to say something about L. Ron Hubbard, or Mary Sue Hubbard, or the Church of Scientology, or its leading names or figures, I was going to get into trouble fast. I could end up being declared a suppressive person for daring to talk about Mr. Hubbard, his wife, his family, his organizations, or their actions. And I thought, can this be true? That I have greater freedom of speech in just an ordinary human government than in an organization that's dedicated to the idea of freedom of speech and expression, whose fundamental is to bring people up to where they can communicate freely. When the Church of Scientology was founded, its founder, L. Ron Hubbard, wrote the creed of the church, and one of the big things in that creed is that you have the right, the freedom to express yourself, to counter, to utter, to disagree with anyone, including L. Ron Hubbard and his lieutenants and his church. But it turned out that that creed has been abandoned. If you're a member of the church and you speak out against the church publicly or even privately, you are going to be in deep you-know-what. Shortly thereafter, you will probably find yourself excommunicated and declared a suppressive person. And worst of all, when I found out that it wasn't just a rumor, that my hero, L. Ron Hubbard, had come up with something called fair game, that was the last straw.